My name is Arif. I live near East Java, and I remember nights of fear that never fully left behind. Rumors spread like wildfire. People whispered about shadowy figures, strangers in black, who moved like ghosts through the alleys silently. At first we thought pranks, then missing neighbors, then bodies, then the village learning how to scream without stopping ever. They called the killers ninjas, because black clothes hid faces, moving quickly, slipping between shadow and torchlight without anywhere. People said sorcerers cursed their cattle, muttered at night, and villages answered with rage, fear, and brutal, terrible violence immediately. One night they dragged old Pak Saman from his hut, accusing him loudly, beating him until his bones broke completely. We watched from doorways, children clinging quietly, mothers covering faces, while men became judges and executioners without trial or mercy. They burned huts, they beheaded men, they set stakes with heads, parading them like warnings down dusty roads in silence. Sometimes victims were children, sometimes elders, sometimes clerics, accused without proof, taken by mobs hungry for certainty and trembling crowds. Police tried to intervene, sometimes arresting suspects, sometimes standing down, overwhelmed by panic and local fury on streets and nights. I saw a boy named Deddy, young and shy, accused at night, dragged out, his screams swallowed by roaring torches. Neighbors who protested were warned, threatened, beaten also, silence purchased with fear, and friends stopped meeting in markets after dusk. We found bodies by the roadside, faces gashed, throats cut, hands bound, and sometimes a child's toy placed nearby alone. Stories spread of shadowy assassins, of men in black striking quickly, leaving horror that communities could not explain or understand. Old grievances mixed with political chaos. Suharto's fall shook the nation. Uncertainty fed superstition and brutal communal violence across regions. Some victims were mental patients, unable to explain themselves, leaving them vulnerable to accusations and sudden, lethal judgments by mobs. I remember nights hearing whips and shouts, then silence, then the slow, awful sound of dogs sniffing burned soil again. Families buried with tiny coffins, mothers folded hands, fathers stared at ground, bitterness and grief etched into weathered faces always. Some who led the mobs wore masks, others were neighbors, sometimes teenagers, sometimes elders convinced of a sorcerous threat nearby. I hid once, watching men dig shallow graves. They worked quickly, whispering prayers, as if rites could justify murder sometimes. Craftsmen and farmers joined patrols, holding torches, searching fields, driven by rumors more powerful than law or reason that night. One morning they paraded heads on stakes, a macabre procession. Children stared in silence. Adults clapped, as if cheering wildly. I saw a cleric blamed, dragged from his mosque, his robes torn, his voice begging, ignored by a furious crowd. Hospitals overflowed with injured. Doctors worked without sleep, bandaging cuts of those barely accused, fear filling corridors all night. The press called it the ninja scare. Newspapers printed lurid images, fueling panic across towns and rural communities nearby quickly. Authorities sometimes arrested suspects, sometimes released them, police unsure how to stop mobs armed with belief and makeshift weapons violently. I remember a night when 3 men were tied, tortured, and then left bleeding, their cries echoing long into empty fields. Villages fortified gates, children never played alone, elders forbade travel, and markets thinned as fear controlled daily life everywhere then. Some accused were mental patients, unable to speak clearly, dragged from shelters, killed because they could not explain themselves properly. Religious leaders tried calming crowds, calling for law, but some clerics were themselves accused, trust frayed like old rope quickly. I spoke with a farmer who lost his cousin. He said justice failed. Anger turned sorrow into violent retribution across nights. Bodies were hidden, burned, sometimes mutilated. Evidence vanished quickly, making prosecutions rare and rumors stronger than anyone hoped. Families lit candles at graves. Mothers prayed loudly. Children watched silently, the river holding secrets like a memory of blood. Even now I walk past those stones and my feet slow, because memory is a weight that needs to be carried, and the river keeps some of the town's secrets underwater. Those who survive their attacks carry scars and nightmares, and I have seen brave faces falter when a child runs past playing, because fear returns in sudden, sharp ways. Legal debates continued for years, appeals filed, some convictions overturned, and the long arc of justice bent under pressure from both human error and legal complexity. The superior universal lineage controversy linked to other regional cases, and the web of allegations stretched into other towns, making investigators question whether they faced a single monstrous network or overlapping myths. Journalists pieced together court filings that named doctors, local businessmen, and security men as suspects, creating a picture of complicity and suspicion that fractured trust. Families demanded better forensic work, mandatory autopsies, and protected witness statements, because nothing heals grief like truth, even if truth is sharp as a blade. Human rights reports later urged systemic reforms, and advocates pushed for better child protection laws, while some policymakers promised change that took years to arrive. The cases taught us how rumor can turn cruel when institutions are weak, and how vulnerable children become targets when society's watchmen sleep in the wrong hours. Years later, researchers warned about sensational media, urging balance and care in reporting, because headlines can sometimes feed the very panic they aim to expose. I remember the sounds of police cars, the hard shoes on dirt, the hush at funerals, and the ways neighbors stopped meeting as they used to, because grief is contagious and fear is louder than song. Some convictions remained on the books, while appeals layered over them like new dust, complicating closure and leaving many families in suspended sorrow. Activists organized vigils and marches, holding placards with boys' names, and those small protests sometimes sparked pity, sometimes change, and sometimes only momentary attention. Teachers began teaching safety rules more strictly, and parents kept boys closer at dusk, leading to a childhood lived in guarded pockets and limited freedom. Medical testimony about wounds remained central in trials, with experts tracing cuts and burns, and forensic detail that turned horror into courtroom evidence. The public memory of East Java is a wound still being dressed, a history of grief and contested truth, told in court transcripts and whispered in markets. When I tell this, you must know I do not invent details to frighten you. Each horror here is drawn from reports and investigations documented by newspapers and human rights groups. If you want proof, look to the records, the court files, the investigative reports, and the human rights petitions that pressed for answers across sovereign borders. The town still exists, children play, but vigilance and caution walk beside them always, because memories of those black-clad nights never vanish entirely. I say their names quietly sometimes in the market, and elders nod because each of us remembers someone who never came home again. This is a true story. It happened in East Java in 1998. It involved over 300 people hunted and killed due to ninja scare, and the facts are recorded in investigative reporting, court records, and human rights documents.